Welcome to the Treehouse Show podcast, your weekly dose of tech and all things Team Treehouse. All right, so let's get into today's episode. I am all by myself today. We don't have Laura, it's just me. So I wanted to talk a little bit about my experience with the front-end tech degree at Treehouse. You might remember a few episodes back, I told you a little bit about my story, and I touched on a little bit about my experience with Treehouse, but today I want to dive a lot deeper into it. And I want to talk a lot about what my actual experience was like, and maybe even compare it to how the tech degree is today. So let's go back all the way to 2019. 2019 is when I took the front-end web development tech degree at Treehouse, and going into it, I was very nervous. I was not working at the time, so I did this full time. And the reason I was nervous was I was having to spend $200 a month for my tech degree, and I didn't have any income coming in. So I took a pretty big leap of faith when it came to this. So rightfully so, I was a little bit nervous. But if you listen to a few episodes back, you'll know that I mentioned I have a little bit of an addictive personality. And I'm super addictive when it comes to learning things. So whenever I'm doing something new, I'm going to really dive into it, right? I'm going to spend a lot of my free time on it. I'm going to learn everything there is to learn about it. And I'm going to be very proficient in it. It's just kind of how I am. And I do think that that's why I was able to learn as quickly as I did. But I took that front-end tech degree, and I was addicted to it. I didn't know much about code or tech in general when I started, so it was very new to me. And I spent, I would say, probably 5, maybe 6 hours a day studying. And then I would spend probably 2 to 3 extra hours outside of that learning extra resources on what I had learned or practicing what I had learned. And I really do think that that's why I was able to learn as quickly as I did. So let's kind of take a step back and go to the beginning. And I want to kind of explain exactly, how I got started with it. So as you know, I finished the front-end web development tech degree, but that's not the first tech degree I started. I actually started the full stack JavaScript tech degree. And I didn't know anything about tech. I didn't know anything about coding. I just know that I thought it was really, really interesting, and I would love to do that for a living. And, there's also a lot of perks with it, working from home and just, working, mostly by yourself and working with small teams and things like that. It really appealed to me. I wanted to do more of it. I wanted to learn it. So I went to the website and I was like, okay, there's a front-end tech degree and then there's full stack JavaScript. And I knew I wanted to do one of the two. And I got a little bit more information about what each one entailed. And I learned that the front-end tech degree taught you the front end. And then I learned that there's 2 types. There's the front end and then there's the back end. And I was thinking, well, if I'm going to spend $200 a month, it would be really cool to learn both. So I saw that the full stack JavaScript tech degree actually teaches you the front end pretty briefly, but enough to get by, and then teaches you the back end. So you come out with learning both. And I thought, okay, cool. That's definitely what I'm going to do. I did a few of the courses. I got to the very first unit and I had to build a project. I believe the project was a random quote generator. And I was so lost. I feel like I rushed through. I didn't have the right mindset. I was just trying to hurry up and get through this. I was spending $200 a month, so I wanted to do it as quickly as possible. And I realized I was not ready for that first project whatsoever. And I also feel like I bit off more than I could chew. I didn't understand HTML or CSS well enough to even build the UI, much less write JavaScript logic to generate a random quote. So I was a little stuck. I was a little stumped, and I didn't know what to do. I was like, I don't want to stop doing this. I want to get more training. I want to learn more. And I remember being in the Slack community, and I just saw everyone talking about the units they were in. There was a chit chat channel where everyone was just hanging out, and somebody was kind of having the same experience as me. They felt like they joined the wrong tech degree, they couldn't learn. And I think what they ended up doing is just realizing this isn't a race, it's a marathon. We need to take our time. We need to really invest in our learning, and we owe it to our future selves to take the time to understand everything correctly. I decided, also like this other person that I'm talking about from the Slack community, that we probably should have just started off with the front end tech degree. So that's what I did. I got out of the full stack JavaScript tech degree and I popped right into the front end. And wow, that was definitely the right move. I felt like it was more geared for beginners and I was able to understand things. It went into a lot more detail about the basics, which I didn't, have that knowledge prior. And it's not to rag on the full stack JavaScript tech degree because it is an amazing tech degree. And I did actually take it after the front end, and I was well prepared for it at that point. I think that if you're starting out with absolutely zero experience and you really want to get a good understanding of things, the front end tech degree is where you should start. And the full stack JavaScript tech degree was so much easier when I got into it after the front end. I was able to, whiz past it pretty great. Loved it. It was an awesome tech degree, but just starting out, absolutely think the front end tech degree was the way to go. So if you're unfamiliar with the front end tech degree, I'll just explain a little bit. You learn HTML, then you hop on to CSS. You also learn Sass, and Sass is actually not CSS, but it is compiled to CSS, and it makes writing CSS so much more enjoyable, and I was very, very happy to learn it. I had no issues with CSS until I learned Sass. I was like, wow, this is actually so much easier. So I had a lot of respect for Sass. And just to kind of put this out there, whenever I finished the tech degree and I started looking for jobs, I don't think there was a single job that I applied for that was not asking for Sass as a requirement for the job. So I was very thankful that I was able to learn all I needed to know about Sass with Treehouse in the front-end tech degree. And then after you kind of master the HTML and the CSS aspect of web development, you get thrown into JavaScript. And I heard a lot of bad things about JavaScript. I heard it was very hard to learn, especially if it's your first programming language. So I definitely wanted to take my time with it, and it was fun. It was a lot of fun to learn. It was not as easy to learn as HTML and CSS, obviously, but I stuck with it. Every time I didn't understand something in the lesson, I would kind of go out on CodePen or just like a local thing and build something using what I learned. And I found that was really one of the best ways for me to kind of understand the things that I didn't. But also, if that failed, my other saving grace was just hopping into Slack and asking a question, which kind of brings me to my favorite part of the tech degree. It's the Slack community. I know this might sound salesy and markety, but I'm being completely transparent with you guys. The Slack community with Treehouse is the best feature of the tech degree program, in my opinion. I don't know any other platforms out there that have a real-time community that if you're stuck, you can get questions answered. You can network and meet other people. I actually met my best friend in the tech degree, and we talk every day. He actually just texted me like 10, 15 minutes ago. He wants to game with me when I get off of work this afternoon. So yeah, but he's working as a professional developer. He learned through Treehouse. I'm working as a professional developer. I learned through Treehouse. So it's definitely doable. For anyone that's kind of on the fence about the tech degree, take a look at the other options out there. See what works best for you. For me personally, having the structured curriculum and the Slack community to help me out, as well as the video teaching approach that Treehouse uses, is just perfect for me. It takes all the guesswork out of it. I'm able to get a good quality education, and it's by far my favorite platform for learning how to code. I want to say it took me about 6, maybe 7 months to complete the tech degree, and towards the end, whenever you're about to graduate, you have to take an exam, and I have never felt more ready for an exam in my life. Like, when it was time to take that exam, I did a little bit of studying prior, but I just felt ready. Like, I knew my HTML, I knew my CSS, and I knew my JavaScript, and I was ready to nail that exam. And straight up, I passed it on the first try. It was awesome, and I got my certificate, and I threw that certificate on my portfolio ASAP. Speaking of portfolios, you don't have to worry about building a portfolio when you're finished the tech degree. You actually build it as your last project. So What's really cool with the tech degree is the project. So you start off with, your first project, a little bit of HTML. You go into your second project, it's a little bit of HTML, some CSS work. Then you work on your third project. It kind of utilizes a little bit of both. You kind of build your first full little web page with HTML and CSS on your own. And then for the fourth project, you use Sass, which is one of my, like I said earlier, it's one of my favorite parts of writing CSS now. And then you have the fifth project where you finally dive a little bit into JavaScript, and it's in such a small way that it's not overwhelming. And I was so proud. I was so proud of my fifth project. It was a photo gallery app that had a search feature using JavaScript, and it was so much fun to build. I truly feel like that was my first project where I felt like, hey, I can do this. This is really, really cool. I can see myself doing this professionally and doing it well. And then project 6, oh, that was a lot of JavaScript for that project. You build like a game show app, and it involves a lot of DOM manipulation. You're writing a lot of variables, you're writing some logic, some functions, you work with arrays, you utilize all the fundamentals of JavaScript, and it's one of my favorite projects in the tech degree, just because when you finish that project, you really do feel like a solid developer at that point. You're still a newbie, don't get me wrong, you're still a newbie, but you feel like you are really killing it in the development game at that point. And then project 7 is arguably one of the biggest projects in the tech degree. You build a full-on like web dashboard. It's full of HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. It is just an all-around, well-rounded project. And then you start working with APIs and grabbing data in project 8. And by project 9, you're building your portfolio, and you put all the prior projects I mentioned into that portfolio, and you build something that's really, really showcasing everything that you've learned along the way. And I actually got my first job. If you've listened to the few episodes before this one, I talked about it. I got my first job from my portfolio. I asked my employer after they offered me a position, I was like, so what made me stand out? Because there's so many developers out there applying for jobs, and it's not about if you can do this or that, because everyone can do this or that. It's about standing out, right? And he said your portfolio was just very, very simple, but it was so effective. And that's like the name of the game. It's really hard to get everything you need up on screen in an easy way for the end user to see and understand and navigate. And I felt very well equipped to build my portfolio and build it the way that I wanted, which was I went with the simple route, and I was able to do that very well, very easily with all the knowledge I got for Treehouse. So I submitted my portfolio project, I passed, and I was ready to take my exam. I took it and I passed and got my certificate. And like I said, I threw it up on my portfolio and I just started applying. And there was so much talk around that time that, the pandemic's hitting. It's really hard for people to get jobs. And it was, there was a lot of time in between me graduating before I found my job. Took a few months, but I didn't just, I see a lot of people, they'll finish the tech degree and then they'll just apply and they'll stop learning. No, I don't think you should do that. I think you should obviously apply, and I'd honestly say start applying before. If you end up landing a job, great. If you don't, no harm done, right? Just start applying once you feel like you have the experience and the qualities that, a future employer might need. Just start applying. It really won't hurt anything. But when you're finishing the tech degree and you're starting to apply, keep learning. There's definitely going to be some things throughout the tech degree that, yeah, you understood it, but you could have went way more in detail with. You could have learned more about it. You could build more projects than what we offer in the tech degree. Learn more, get more experience. And if, you're like me and you want to keep going because the platform is so great, join another tech degree, get more experience. I wholeheartedly told myself like, hey, if I could beat this tech degree in 6 months, maybe I won't find a job for 6 months. That's 6 more months though that I could be learning more, and then I'll have even more experience to offer a future employer. So that's what I did. Started taking the full stack JavaScript tech degree not long after I graduated, and I think I was like a few months into that tech degree. I didn't finish it when I got my first job offer. So I actually did paused the tech degree at that point. I started working professionally. And then once I kind of got into the swing of things with that company, I worked back on that tech degree more. But what I really like is that outside of the tech degree, Treehouse had a lot of other things like tracks and workshops and just so much other content. So I will say that my first job required me to understand HTML, CSS, SAS, JavaScript, and a little bit of jQuery, which were all taught in the front end tech degree. But I did also need to learn a few other things. And while my company was okay with me learning while working, I didn't want to solely rely on the senior developers there to teach me. I actually popped into Treehouse a few days out of the week after work and found some courses, found some workshops that kind of went a little bit into ASP.NET, a little bit of Angular, and some things that I needed to use with the company that I had started working for. And I was able to look like I was such a fast learner, which was really, really good. So I can't say enough how much Treehouse has helped me and how much I enjoyed my experience throughout the tech degree. And I would just highly recommend it to anyone who's on the fence about learning tech or want to learn, just don't know how to learn. And I'm not oblivious to the fact that there's so many platforms out there. There's Udemy, there's free stuff on YouTube, right? There's Code Academy, there's Scrimba, there's Free Code Camp. There's so many different ways to learn, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with a single one of those platforms I mentioned, as well as all the other platforms and resources out there that I didn't mention. It's all about how you want to learn and what works best for you. Some people are just really, really good with reading and reading documentation and learning on their own and watching a couple of YouTube videos along the way. Personally, for me, I'm a visual learner. I love to pop a video on, sit back, watch the instructor teach it in a structured way, and just work that way and understand concepts that way. And Treehouse is the platform for that, in my opinion. So a lot of people have asked me, like, what's the difference between Treehouse teaching you front-end web development and these little 4 or 5 hour YouTube courses that I can watch for free? And to be honest, there's not that much difference because there's really only so much or so many ways that you can teach the same thing, right? But like I said, if you have a question or you don't understand something or whatever it may be, and you're watching a YouTube video, what are you going to do? Are you going to comment in the comment section and wait a few days or a week or a month and hope that somebody can reply back? And if so, what if that doesn't answer your question or you have more questions? The Slack community, like I said, it's what did it for me. It really made me feel comfortable, and I was able to make friends. And because of those friendships, I've had more opportunities. I was able to network. I feel like I'm more well-rounded of a developer. And that's just something that a lot of these other platforms don't really have tied into their product as much as Treehouse does. And it's why I'll always really recommend Treehouse. Another thing that's not really talked about too much, and I don't know why, because it's also really, really great, is workspaces. And if you're unfamiliar with workspaces, if you're following along in a video on Treehouse, there's a little button at the bottom right of the video player for workspaces, and it's basically a virtual IDE. So yeah, you can follow along in VS Code or whatever text editor that you really like. But what's really cool is you can also just pop open a workspace and it has all the project files to follow along with the current video you're in so that you can just stay in the browser and just work alongside the instructor. Thought that was always really, really cool. And it's not basic either. Like, you actually have a full-blown terminal in there too. It's really neat. Another thing I'd like to touch on is that was my experience, obviously, and that was, a few years back. It's 2024 now. So are my thoughts and my reservations for Treehouse still the same? And I would say, yeah. I would say yes and no. As the world changes around us, a lot of things change, as well as web development. And if you've been in tech long enough to know, things in tech don't stay still for very long. It seems like just every other day there's a new framework out there. There's something new to learn. So how does that kind of work its way into Treehouse this day and age? And let me just say, if I was starting off brand new, without a shadow of a doubt, I would still go to Treehouse. Treehouse is undeniably the best place to learn as a beginner. If you want to learn the basics and you want to be told which order to learn things and have structure and have dedicated quizzes and code challenges and projects that are graded and a full vibrant community that you can hang out with, talk to, get help, share resources, network, make friends, all of that, the Treehouse is where you should go for that. But I do see there's a lot of hate online, like, oh, Treehouse doesn't teach this, Treehouse doesn't teach that. And it boils down to Treehouse is really good for learning the basics and getting your foot in the door and getting your first developer job. Once you've kind of done that and you've used Treehouse to get all that knowledge and all that understanding of these concepts and stuff, you can further your education with our workshops, our courses, and all that stuff too. But when you want to get into more advanced topics like Next.js or the latest with Astro or HTMX, there are other things out there and other platforms that are geared for more of the what's hot right now, what's super popular. Yeah, I think that might be your best bet, is to go to YouTube and watch those things, those one-off things like that. But if you're looking to get your foot in the door and just get started with tech, Treehouse is by far the best platform that I've seen for that. That's not to say we don't stay up to date with things. When AI started popping off a few months back, we created so much AI content. And it's done really, really well. Everyone's really loved our AI content. We do things in a way that's very beginner friendly. And I think we're one of the only platforms that I've personally seen that really caters to beginners. We don't try to throw out the complicated things and just go straight into LLMs and understanding algorithms and things like that. We try to take a very basic approach, and that's another reason why I'm just over the moon with Treehouse and the platform itself. But I hope you guys enjoyed me rambling about my experience with Treehouse. I just kind of wanted to give a little bit more insight of how it was personally for me. And, maybe it can resonate with you, and maybe you feel like you can relate to me and my story. If you haven't checked out my full story on how I got into coding and how I met Treehouse and all that good stuff, that's episode 2 of the podcast. Be sure to go grab a listen to that. But I'll see you guys next week, same time, same place on the Treehouse Show podcast. Until then, have fun and happy coding. So that wraps up the Treehouse Show podcast for today, and we hope you enjoyed the episode. What would you like to hear us talk about next? Be sure to join our community Discord server and let us know. Worth noting, if you want to give us a shot and learn a code, we've taught over 1.2 million developers and counting. You can set yourself up with a 7-day free trial just by heading on over to teamtreehouse.com. Until next time, have fun and happy coding.